The first sign that my marriage was over wasn't a lipstick-stained collar or a suspicious text message. It was the look on a pharmacist's face. Pity. A deep, soulful, oh you poor clueless bastard kind of pity. It was the sort of look you give a three-legged puppy right before it gets hit by a bus. I was the puppy. The bus was on its way. I was standing under the humming, aggressively cheerful fluorescent lights of a CVS, smelling that uniquely sterile combination of stale candy and floor disinfectant. I'd been sent on an errand. A life-saving errand, to be precise. An hour earlier, my wife, Ilara, had blown into our house like a Category 4 hurricane of her own importance. She was all flying hair, clacking heels, and the frantic energy of someone perpetually 10 minutes late for a meeting with God. "Leo, my love," she'd said, not quite making eye contact as she rifled through her purse for her keys. "You are an absolute lifesaver. Julian is in a terrible way, just terrible. Can you please grab this for him? I've already called it in." She'd pressed a folded piece of paper into my hand, her fingers cool and brief against mine. "The name is Julian Croft. I owe you. Big time." A peck on the cheek, the scent of her expensive perfume, and she was gone, the front door clicking shut behind her. Julian Croft, her boss. I pictured a 50-something guy with a comb-over and a perpetually stressed expression, the kind of man who lives on bad coffee and antacids. Ilara had mentioned him being under the weather before. I, being the ever-accommodating, conflict-averse husband, had simply nodded and said, "Of course, honey." So there I was, in line behind a woman buying enough hemorrhoid cream to service a small army, feeling like the world's most dutiful husband. When my turn came, I stepped up to the counter and smiled at the pharmacist, a kindly-looking woman with graying hair and a name tag that read Mrs. Gable. "Hi, I'm picking up a prescription for Julian Croft," I said. Mrs. Gable's professional smile faltered. It was just for a second, but it was there. Her eyes did a quick scan of my face, and that's when I saw it. The look, the puppy and bus look. "Oh," she said, her voice softening with something I didn't yet understand. "For Julian? You must be Leo then." The first crack appeared in the foundation of my life. How did this stranger know my name? Yeah, that's me. How did you—" She offered a weak, reassuring smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Ilara mentioned you when she called. Just a moment." She disappeared into the wall of beige plastic drawers behind her and returned with a small, white paper bag. As she scanned the barcode, I craned my neck to see the label. It's a habit, a holdover from the years my dad was sick. I always check the medication. The name on the label was tacrolimus. A cold, metallic dread flooded my veins, tasting like old pennies. My breath hitched. It wasn't an antibiotic. It wasn't an inhaler. It wasn't even a high-powered painkiller. I knew exactly what tacrolimus was. My father had taken it every single day for the 5 years after his kidney transplant. It was a potent immunosuppressant. A serious, lifelong, don't mess this up or your new organ will eject itself from your body kind of drug. The floor seemed to drop out from under me. Julian Croft wasn't under the weather. Julian Croft had someone else's organ inside him. As if to confirm the complete and utter demolition of my world, Mrs. Gable bagged the prescription and pushed it toward me. She leaned in conspiratorially, her voice a low, kind whisper. "It's a wonderful thing you and Ilara are doing, supporting him through this," she said, her eyes radiating that awful, soul-crushing pity. "She listed you both as his primary emergency contacts. He's a lucky man to have such a dedicated team." Team. Emergency contacts. The words didn't compute. They were puzzle pieces from a different box, forced into the jigsaw of my life. I think I paid, My muscle memory must have handled the transaction, and took the bag. It felt impossibly heavy in my hand, like it contained not a bottle of pills, but a black hole that was rapidly sucking in the last 10 years of my life. I walked out of the CVS, the automatic doors sliding open with a cheerful whoosh. The bright afternoon sun felt like an insult. My life, as I knew it, had just ended between the incontinence aisle and the photo kiosk, and the world had the audacity to keep spinning. I had been sent to pick up a prescription for my wife's sick boss, but what I was holding in my hand was proof. Proof of a lie so profound, so devastatingly intimate, that I couldn't yet see its edges. I didn't go home. I couldn't. The house wasn't a sanctuary anymore. It was a crime scene, and I wasn't ready to face it. I drove, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. I ended up at a scenic overlook, one of those places where teenagers go to make out and tourists go to take panoramic photos of a city that suddenly felt alien to me. I killed the engine and the silence was deafening. I pulled the prescription bottle from the bag. Julian Croft, 125B Riverwalk Plaza. The address was for a new, sleek, luxury apartment building downtown, the kind with a concierge and a rooftop pool. The kind I, a humble work-from-home graphic designer, could only afford if I sold a kidney, not received one. The name of the prescribing doctor was there too, Dr. Alistair Finch. A quick Google search on my phone confirmed it. Head of transplant surgery at University Hospital. Team. The word echoed in the silent car. A team. Ilara and me. And Julian. A cozy little triage unit of love and support. I started laughing. It wasn't a happy sound. It was the harsh, ragged sound of a man watching his entire reality crumble into dust. Every ignored red flag from the past 2 years was now waving violently in my face. The late nights that were always a work crisis. The way she'd angle her phone away from me when a text came through. The sudden password on her laptop for security. The growing emotional chasm between us, which I, in my infinite, pathetic wisdom, had blamed on myself. I'm not present enough. I'm too caught up in my own head. I need to be a better husband. I had diagnosed myself with the disease when, all along, I was just a symptom of hers. A coldness I had never felt before settled deep in my bones. It wasn't just anger. It was something clearer, sharper. It was the chilling clarity of absolute certainty. The passivity that had defined my marriage, my entire adult life, began to evaporate under the heat of this new, terrible knowledge. I drove home. Each red light felt like a test of my patience. When I walked through the front door, the house smelled of Ilara's perfume and lemon cleaner. It smelled like a lie. I walked to our polished oak dining room table, the one we bought for all the dinner parties we were going to host, and never did. I placed the small white paper bag directly in the center, a silent, damning monolith. And then I sat down and waited. An hour later, I heard her key in the lock. The door opened, and she breezed in, the same whirlwind of charisma and purpose as always. "Hey, you're a star! Did you get it?" she called out, dropping her leather briefcase by the door. "That meeting was a killer. I could use a glass of wine." She walked into the dining room, and then she stopped. She saw the bag on the table. She saw me sitting there, my face a stone mask. Her cheerful energy vanished, sucked out of the room. The air grew thick and heavy. "Leo?" she said, her voice cautious. "What is it? What's wrong?" I didn't get up. I just looked at her, really looked at her. For the first time in a long, long time. I didn't see my wife. I saw a stranger I happened to live with. "It's tacrolimus, Ilara," I said. My voice was unnervingly calm. "My dad took it for 5 years after his transplant, so I have a couple of questions. One, why does your boss need an anti-rejection drug? And 2, why are we his emergency contacts? The mask of the loving wife didn't just crack. It fell away completely. In its place was another, one I'd never seen before. It was a mask of furious, wounded indignation. Her eyes narrowed, her posture straightened. She was going on the offensive. "My God, Leo," she spat, her voice dripping with disdain. "Is that seriously where your mind goes? To some sordid, pathetic little accusation?" "It's a simple question, Elara." "No, it's not. It's disgusting," she said, taking a step closer, her voice rising. "Julian is a desperately sick man. He collapsed at work a few months ago. He has no family in this city, none. I'm his friend. I'm his manager. I'm trying to be a decent human being. And you sit here, turning it into something ugly and cheap." It was a masterful performance. I almost felt myself start to shrink back, my old familiar guilt reflex kicking in. Here I am, being the bad guy again, making a scene. "The pharmacist knew my name, Elara. You told her I was coming." "Of course I did," she shot back, throwing her hands up in exasperation. "I told her my husband would be picking it up. Because he's a good man and I can rely on him. Or at least I thought I could. I can't believe you're doing this." She was coming for the jugular now, twisting my own nature into a weapon against me. "Why did you list me as an emergency contact without telling me?" I pressed, my voice still quiet. "Because he was being admitted and they needed a name. And I panicked. I put down the most reliable person I know, you. Forgive me for thinking my own husband had my back." Tears, actual tears, welled in her eyes. "This isn't about you, Leo. For once, can't you see that? The world doesn't revolve around you and your insecurities." And there it was, the kill shot. My insecurities. The catch-all explanation for every time I'd ever questioned her, ever felt a flicker of doubt. I was the insecure one. I was the paranoid one. She was the saint, just trying to help a poor, sick man. And I was the monster for questioning her motives. For a dizzying, terrifying second, I almost believed her. My entire sense of reality wavered. Maybe I was a monster. Maybe I had twisted a simple act of kindness into something vile because I was a jealous, pathetic husband. She saw my resolve falter. She moved in, her tone softening. She knelt beside my chair and took my hand. Her touch felt like ice. "Hey," she whispered, the tears now gone, replaced by a soothing calm. "Look at me. We're a team. Let's not fight about this. I'm just trying to do a good thing, okay?" I looked into her eyes, searching for a flicker of the woman I married. I found nothing. Just a performer playing a role. I gave a slow, numb nod. But it was a lie. And in the chilling silence of our dining room, I knew, with the certainty of a death sentence, that I was going to find the truth. Elara seemed to think she had won. She comforted me, then suggested we order takeout and watch a movie, an attempt to paper over the gaping wound she had just ripped open. I went along with it, a ghost in my own home. I watched her laugh at the TV, her head resting on my shoulder, and I felt nothing but a profound, alienating cold. The argument was over, but the war had just begun. That night, sleep was a foreign country I couldn't visit. I lay perfectly still, listening to the rhythm of Elara's breathing beside me. It was the breathing of a person with a clear conscience. The breathing of a very, very good liar. The pity on Mrs. Gable's face was burned into my mind. That was real. The pity was my North Star. The next day, as soon as Elara left for work, I had to physically stop myself from using air quotes. I went to my office. My design work could wait. I had a new project. Deconstruct my life. I didn't know where to start. I wasn't a private investigator. I was a guy who spent 8 hours a day debating the kerning on fonts. But my doubt had festered overnight into a furious, methodical need for proof. I wasn't looking for reassurance anymore. I was looking for ammunition. I started with the easiest thing, our joint credit card account. I logged in online, my heart thudding a nervous rhythm against my ribs. I'd always let Alara handle the finances. "You're the creative, honey," she'd say with a patronizing little smile. "Let me handle the boring numbers stuff." I now realized boring numbers stuff was a euphemism for evidence. I set the search filter for the last 12 months, and there it was, a digital roadmap of her betrayal. Dozens of charges at restaurants I'd never heard of: Coq au vin, Le Cirque, the Gilded Sparrow. Always on a weeknight, always a table for two. I cross-referenced the dates with my calendar. They were all nights she'd worked late. There were charges from a high-end flower shop a block away from Riverwalk Plaza. Who was she buying flowers for? Then I found the parking garage, a recurring monthly charge. A quick search showed it was the dedicated garage for, you guessed it, Riverwalk Plaza. She wasn't just visiting him. She had her own spot. My hands were shaking, but I kept digging, scrolling backwards through months of statements, a grim archaeologist of my own failed marriage. And then I saw it. The thing that made the fancy dinners and parking spots look like child's play. I switched from the credit card to our joint savings account. This was our nest egg, our dream home in the suburbs with a golden retriever fund. It was the manifestation of 10 years of shared hopes, or so I thought. 2 weeks ago, a wire transfer for $75,000. My breath caught in my throat. 75 grand, gone. Transferred to a company I'd never heard of. Apex Title and Holding. I stared at the screen, my mind refusing to process the number. It was more than half of everything we had saved. And then I saw the memo line, the 2 words that officially ended my marriage. 2 words that felt like a punch to the solar plexus. Croft/Alara Property Escrow. I leaned back in my chair, the air knocked out of me. A wave of nausea washed over me. This wasn't a fling. This wasn't a midlife crisis. This was a hostile takeover. They were using my money, our money, to buy a property together. They were building a future on the foundations of our past. The house, the dog, the picket fence. She was building that dream, just not with me. The last shred of my passivity, of the man who let things happen to him, was incinerated in that moment. It was replaced by a cold, surgical rage. I had the what. Now I needed to see the who. I grabbed my car keys and the prescription bag. It was time to make a delivery. The drive downtown was a blur. I was on autopilot, fueled by a righteous fury I never knew I possessed. I pulled into the visitor's lot of Riverwalk Plaza. I wasn't about to pay for parking, and walked into the lobby. It smelled like money and subtle, expensive air freshener. A far cry from my world of spilled coffee and the faint scent of turpentine from my old canvases. I took the elevator to the 12th floor. The hallway was silent, carpeted, and anonymous. I found apartment 12B and stood before the door for a long moment, the prescription bag crinkling in my clenched fist. What was I even doing here? What did I expect to accomplish? I pressed the buzzer. My heart hammered against my ribs. A moment later, a voice crackled through the intercom, weak but clear. "Hello?" I leaned in. "It's Leo, Alara's husband. I have your medication." There was a pause. Not of confusion, but of resignation. Then the sharp, distinct sound of the door buzzing open. He was expecting me. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The apartment was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city I now hated. The decor was a tasteful, seamless blend of masculine leather and feminine soft throws and art pieces. It looked lived in. It looked like a home, their home. And her things were everywhere, not hidden, but displayed. her favorite brand of jasmine green tea on the kitchen counter, her brightly colored running shoes tucked neatly by the door, and on the sleek, modern mantelpiece, the final, brutal confirmation, a silver-framed photograph of Ilara and a handsome, smiling man on a tropical beach. Ilara was looking at him with a kind of unguarded adoration I hadn't seen directed at me in years. The man from the photo appeared from a hallway. He was pale and moved slowly, leaning against the doorframe for support. He was wearing a silk robe. Julian Croft. He looked genuinely ill, but his eyes were sharp and intelligent. There was no surprise in them. "I suppose this was inevitable," he said, his voice raspy. "Come in." The lack of drama was somehow more disorienting than a shouting match would have been. I walked further into the room, feeling like an intruder in my own life. "She told me you were at the office," I said, my voice flat. He gave a Sjöndal, weary smile. "That's her go-to. Predictable, if nothing else." He gestured to a leather armchair. "You want to sit, or you just here to punch the sick guy? For the record, I'd prefer you didn't. I bruise easily these days." His candor was a bucket of ice water. "I just want to understand," I said, remaining standing. I placed the prescription bag on his marble coffee table. He sank into the opposite sofa with a soft groan. "Understand what, Leo? It's the oldest story in the book. I'm not going to insult your intelligence by pretending otherwise." He looked at me, his gaze unflinching. "The affair has been going on for 2 years. I got sick. My kidney failed. She was my rock." The words, so simple and direct, were devastating. He wasn't a monster. He was just a man who had fallen in love with my wife, or who my wife had fallen in love with. The distinction barely mattered anymore. I was about to turn and leave, to just walk away from this whole surreal nightmare. But then Julian said the words that would change everything. The words that would provide the final, liberating twist of the knife. He must have seen the utter defeat in my face. He sighed, a long, rattling breath. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry," he said, and he sounded like he meant it. "This was never how I wanted it to happen. But she always told me, she swore to me, that you two had an arrangement." I stared at him. "An arrangement?" "An open marriage," Julian said softly, his eyes full of a pity that was somehow worse than Mrs. Gable's. "She told me you had grown apart years ago, that you were basically roommates. She said you were happy for her, that you were glad she'd found someone who could, well, meet her needs. She said you were fine with it. Of all the lies, that was the one. The cheating was a betrayal of our vows. The stolen money was a betrayal of our future. But this was a betrayal of our past. It was a betrayal of my very identity. She hadn't just cheated on me, she had erased me. In the story Ilara told her lover, I wasn't a grieving husband. I wasn't even an obstacle. I was a footnote, a willing, indifferent participant in my own humiliation. A pathetic cuckold who was fine with it. She had taken 10 years of my love, my devotion, my sacrifices, my patience, and rewritten it all as a convenient fiction to make her affair tidier. My pain, in her narrative, didn't exist. It was the most profound, most sociopathic betrayal of all. A strange, calm clarity washed over me in that sun-drenched, lie-filled apartment. The rage was gone. The hurt was gone. All that was left was a cold, hard, immutable truth. It was over. But it wouldn't be over on her terms. It would be over on mine. I looked at Julian, the sick man in the silk robe who had inadvertently handed me the key to my own freedom. "Thank you," I said. My voice was even. He looked confused. "For what?" "For telling me the truth." I turned and walked out of the apartment, leaving the prescription on the table. I didn't slam the door. I closed it softly behind me. I drove home, and the world looked different, sharper, more defined. I returned not to a crime scene but to a temporary storage facility, a place that held my things. I went straight to the bedroom and pulled my old, worn suitcase from the top of the closet. I didn't pack in a frenzy. I packed with the serene, deliberate purpose of a man defusing a bomb. I laid out my clothes, shirts, jeans, socks, the essentials. I packed my work computer and my hard drives, my livelihood. Then, I walked around the house, not collecting memories, but curating the pieces of the man I was before he was absorbed into the entity known as Ilara and Leo. From my office, I took the framed photo of my parents from my desk. From the living room, I took nothing. It was all ours. From the bedroom, I took an old, dog-eared copy of a book my father had given me. I left her jewelry box. I left the expensive art she'd picked out. I left everything that was a part of the lie. My suitcase wasn't full of things I was taking with me. It was full of things she couldn't have. I had just zipped the suitcase when I heard her key in the lock. The timing was almost poetic. She walked in, carrying a bag of takeout, a peace offering. "Hey, I thought we could," she began. And then she saw it. The suitcase standing by the door. My car keys in my hand. Me, standing there, waiting. The mask dropped. The game was up. She knew it instantly. "Leo." Her voice was a tight whisper. "What are you doing?" "I'm leaving, Ilara." First came the tears, the default setting. "What? No, Leo, we can talk about this. Don't do this. I know you're upset, but I went to see him," I said, cutting her off. "I delivered the prescription." Her face went pale. The tears stopped. Now came the excuses, the frantic search for a new narrative. "It just happened. I never meant to hurt you. I swear, I love you." I almost laughed. "Do you? Or am I just a reliable guy who can pick up your boyfriend's medicine for you?" Her face hardened. The cornered animal was coming out to fight. "Oh, don't you dare play the victim!" she snarled, her voice dripping with venom. "Where have you been for the last 5 years, Leo? In your own little world, never present, never engaged. You just let life happen to you. What did you expect?" I had expected her to say that. It was the last weapon in her arsenal, my own perceived weakness. The old Leo would have flinched. The old Leo would have absorbed the blame. The new Leo just looked at her, at this desperate, flailing stranger, and felt a distant, clinical pity. I didn't yell, I didn't scream, I just held up my car keys. "You told him we had an open marriage," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the air like a razor. I let the words hang there, letting her feel their full weight. She flinched, a tiny, almost imperceptible reaction. That's how I knew Julian was telling the truth. "You didn't just lie to me, Ilara," I continued, my voice perfectly steady. "You lied about me. You turned a decade of my life into a joke to make your affair more convenient. You didn't just cheat on me. You erased me." I walked to the door, my suitcase rolling softly behind me on the hardwood floor. She was speechless, her mouth slightly agape. For the first time in our entire relationship, Ilara had no script. I put my hand on the doorknob and turned back to look at her one last time. "You wanted me to pick up his prescription," I said, my voice clear and strong. "It was the most important errand you ever sent me on, because on the way I finally picked up something I'd lost a long time ago." I paused, letting her see the new light in my eyes. My self-worth. I turned the key, opened the door, and walked out into the cool evening air. I didn't look back. The click of the lock behind me was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. The epilogue of my old life and the prologue to my new one took place 6 months later. I was living in a small, ridiculously overpriced apartment in a city 3 states away. It had a big window that faced west, and every evening the setting sun would flood the place with a warm, golden light that felt like a promise. I was working for a boutique design agency, a place where my ideas were not only heard, but celebrated. They had hired me based on a new portfolio I'd feverishly built in the first few weeks after I left, a torrent of creativity unlocked by the implosion of my life. I was thinner, but it was the lean, sharp look of a man stripped of excess, not the gaunt look of a man consumed by grief. My eyes were clear. That afternoon, I ended a brief, blessedly impersonal call with my lawyer. The divorce was final. It had been messy. Alara had fought, of course, not to get me back, but to keep the money. The escrow account had been frozen, the property purchase canceled. In the end, I let her have the house. I didn't want a single brick of that mausoleum of lies. But I fought for my half of the savings. The old Leo would have rolled over to avoid the conflict. The new Leo hired a shark, stood his ground, and got back what was his. The fight itself was the real victory. After the call, I walked into my new kitchen. It was small, but it was mine. Everything in it, from the cheap IKEA cutlery to the single perfect coffee mug, had been chosen by me, for me. On the counter sat a prescription bottle. The label had my name on it, Leo Maxwell. I picked it up. A few weeks ago, I had gone for my first physical in over 5 years. An act of pure, unadulterated self-care. The doctor, a no-nonsense woman who reminded me of a drill sergeant, had told me I was healthy but running on fumes. She'd prescribed a simple, once-a-day multivitamin. I twisted the cap, tapped one of the large, chalky pills into my palm, and swallowed it with a glass of water from the tap. It was nothing. A simple vitamin. A prescription for basic maintenance. But as I stood there, looking out my window at the endless, anonymous skyline of my new home, it felt like everything. It was a prescription I had filled for myself. For the first time in a decade, I smiled. A genuine, uncomplicated, peaceful smile. My wife had sent me out to pick up a prescription that ended our marriage. In doing so, she'd inadvertently forced me to write a new one for myself. The dosage was 1 new day, taken every morning, unlimited refills,